Welcome to a Fireside Reading of Moby Dick by Herman Melville, Chapter 29. Enter Ahab, to him Stub. Some days elapsed, and ice and icebergs all astern the Pequod now went rolling through the bright Quito spring, which at sea almost perpetually reigns on the threshold of the eternal August of the tropic. The warmly cool, clear, ringing, perfumed, overflowing, redundant days were as crystal goblets of Persian sherbet, heaped up, flaked up with rose-water snow. The starred and stately knights seemed haughty damed in jeweled velvets, nursing at home in lonely pride the memory of their absent conquering earls, the golden helmeted sons. For sleeping man 'twas hard to choose between such winsome days and such seducing nights. But all the witcheries of that unwaning weather did not merely lend new spells and potencies to the outward world. Inward they turned upon the soul, especially when the still mild hours of eve came on. Then memory shot her crystals as the clear ice most forms of noiseless twilights. And all these subtle agencies, more and more, they wrought on Ahab's texture. Old age is always wakeful, as if the longer linked with life, the less man has to do with aught that looks like death. Among sea commanders, the old greybeards will oftenest leave their berths to visit the night night-cloaked deck. It was so with Ahab, only that now, of late, he seemed so much to live in the open air that, truly speaking, his visits were more to the cabin than from the cabin to the planks. "It feels like going down into one's own tomb," he would mutter to himself. "For an old captain like me to be descending this narrow scuttle to go to my grave-dug berth." So, almost every 24 hours, when the watches of the night were set, and the band on deck sentineled the slumbers of the band below, and when, if a rope was to be hauled upon the forecastle, the sailors flung it not rudely down as by day, but with some cautiousness dropped it to its place for fear of disturbing their slumbering shipmates, when this sort of steady quietude would begin to prevail habitually, the silent steersman would watch the cabin scuttle. And ere long, the old man would emerge, gripping at the iron banister to help his crippled way. Some considering touch of humanity was in him, for at times like these he usually abstained from patrolling the quarterdeck, because to his wearied mates seeking repose within 6 inches of his ivory heel, such would have been the reverberating crack and din of that bony step, that their dreams would have been on the crunching teeth of sharks. But once the mood was on him too deep for common regardings, and as with heavy lumber-like pace he was measuring the ship from taffrail to mainmast, Stub, the second mate, came up from below with a certain unassured, deprecating humorousness, hinted that if Captain Ahab was pleased to walk the planks, then no one could say nay, but there might be some way of muffling the noise, hinting something indistinctly and hesitatingly about a globe of tow and the insertion into it of the ivory heel. "Ah, Stubb, thou didst not know Ahab then." "Am I a cannonball, Stubb," said Ahab, "that thou wouldst wad me that fashion? But go thy ways, I had forgot. Below to thy nightly grave, where such as ye sleep between shrouds, to use ye to the filing one last time. Down, dog and kennel!" Starting at the unforeseen concluding exclamation of the so suddenly scornful old man, Stubb was speechless a moment, then said excitedly, "I am not used to be spoken to that way, sir. I do but less than half like it, sir." "Avast!" gritted Ahab between his set teeth, and violently moving away as if to avoid some passionate temptation. "No, sir, not yet," said Stubb, emboldened. "I will not tamely be called a dog, sir." "Then be called 10 times a donkey, and a mule, and an ass, and begone, or I'll clear the world of thee." As he said this, Ahab advanced upon him with such overbearing terrors in his aspect that Stubb involuntarily retreated. "I was never served so before without giving a hard blow for it," muttered Stubb as he found himself descending the cabin scuttle. "It's very queer. Stop, Stubb! Somehow now I don't well know whether to go back and strike him or... What's that? Down here on my knees and pray for him? Yes, that was the thought coming up in me, but it would be the first time I ever did pray. It's queer, very queer, and he's queer too. Aye, take him fore and aft. He's about the queerest old man Stubb ever sailed with. How he flashed at me, his eyes like powder pans. Is he mad? Anyway, there's something on his mind as sure as there must be something on a deck where it cracks. He ain't in his bed now either, more than 3 hours out of the 24, and he don't sleep then. Didn't that doughboy, the steward, tell me that of a morning he always finds the old man's hammock clothes all rumpled and tumbled, and the sheets down at the foot, and the coverlid almost tied into knots, and the pillow a sort of frightful hot, as though a baked brick had been on it. A hot old man. I guess he's got what some folks ashore call a conscience. It's a kind of tick-dolly row, they say, worse nor a toothache. Well, well, I don't know what it is, but the Lord keep me from catching it. He's full of riddles. I wonder what he goes into the afterhold for every night, as Doughboy tells me he suspects. What's that for, I should like to know? Who's made appointments with him in the hold? Ain't that queer now? But there's no telling, it's the old game. Here goes for a snooze. Damn me, it's worth a fellow's while to be born into the world, if only to fall right asleep. And now that I think of it, that's about the first thing babies do. And that's a sort of queer, too. Damn me, but all things are queer, come to think of them. But that's against my principles. Think not is my 11th commandment, and sleep when you can is my 12th, so here goes again. But how's that? Didn't he call me a dog, blazes? He called me 10 times a donkey and piled a lot of jackasses on top of that. He might as well have kicked me and done with it. Maybe he did kick me. And I didn't observe it. I was so taken all aback with his brow somehow, it flashed like a bleached bone. What the devil's the matter with me? I don't stand right on my legs, coming afoul of that old man as a sort of turned me wrong side out. By the Lord, I must have been dreaming, though. How? But the only way's to stash it, so here goes to the hammock again, and in the morning I'll see how this plaguey juggling thinks over by daylight. Chapter 30. The Pipe. When Stubb had departed, Ahab stood for a while, leaning over the bulwarks, and then, as had been usual with him of late, calling a sailor to the watch, he sent him below for his ivory stool and also his pipe. Lighting the pipe at the binnacle lamp and planting the stool on the weather side of the deck, he sat and smoked. In old Norse times, the thrones of the sea-loving Danish kings were fabricated, saith tradition, of the tusks of the narwhal. How could one look at Ahab, then, seated on that tripod of bones, without bethinking him of the royalty it symbolized? For a Khan of the plank, and a king of the sea, and a great lord of Leviathans was Ahab. Some moments passed, during which the thick vapor came from his mouth in quick and constant puffs, which blew back again into his face. "How now?" he soliloquized at last, withdrawing the tube. "This smoking no longer soothes. Oh, my pipe, hard must it go with me if thy charm be gone. Here have I been unconsciously toiling, not pleasuring, aye, and ignorantly smoking to windward all the while, to windward, and with such nervous whiffs as if, like the dying whale, my final jets were the strongest and fullest of trouble. What business have I with this pipe, this thing that is meant for sereneness, to send up mild, white vapors among mild, white hairs, not among torn, iron-gray locks like mine? I'll smoke no more." He tossed the still-lighted pipe into the sea. The fire hissed in the waves. The same instant the ship shot by the bubble the sinking pipe made. With slouched hat, Ahab lurchingly paced the planks. Chapter 31. Queen Mab. Next morning, Stubb accosted Flask. "Such a queer dream, King Post, I never had. You know the old man's ivory leg? Well, I dreamed he kicked me with it, and then I tried to kick back upon my soul. My little man, I kicked my leg right off. And then, presto, Ahab seemed a pyramid, and I, like a blazing fool, kept kicking at it. But what was still more curious, Flask, you know how curious dreams are, through all this rage that I was in, I somehow seemed to be thinking to myself that after all it was not much of an insult, that kick from Ahab. Why, thinks I, what's the row? It's not a real leg, only a false leg. There's a mighty difference between a living thump and a dead thump. That's what makes a blow from the hand, Flask, 50 times more savage to bear than a blow from a cane. The living member, that makes the living insult, my little man. And thinks I to myself all the while, mind while I was stubbing my silly toes against that cursed pyramid, so confoundedly contradictory was it all the while, I say, I was thinking to myself, what's his leg now but a cane? A whalebone cane? Yes, thinks I, it was only a playful cudgelling, in fact, only a whale boning that he gave me, not a base kick. Besides, thinks I, look at it once. Why, the end of it, the foot part, what a small sort of end it is. Whereas if a broad-footed farmer kicked me, there's a devilish broad insult. But this insult is whittled down to a point only. But now comes the greatest joke of the dream, Flask. While I was battering away at the pyramid, a sort of badger-haired old merman with a hump on his back takes me by the shoulders and slews me round. "What are you about?" says he. Slid, man, but I was frightened. Such a fizz! But somehow next moment I was over the fright. "What am I about?" says I at last, "and what business is that of yours, I should like to know, Mr. Humpback? Do you want to kick?" By the Lord, Flask, I had no sooner said that than he turned round his stern to me, bent over, and dragging up a lot of seaweed he had for a clout, what do you think I saw? Why, thunder alive, man, his stern was stuck full of marlin spikes, with the points out. Says I, on second thoughts, I guess I won't kick you, old fellow. "Wise stub," said he, "wise stub," and kept muttering it all the time, a sort of eating of his own gums like a chimney hag. Seeing he wasn't going to stop saying over his wise stub, I thought I might as well fall to kicking the pyramid again. But I'd only just lifted my foot for it when he roared out, "Stop that kicking!" "Hello," says I, "what's the matter now, old fellow?" "Look ye here," says he, "let's argue the insult. Captain Ahab kicked ye, didn't he?" "Yes, he did," says I, "right here it was." "Very good," says he. "He used his ivory leg, didn't he?" "Yes, he did," says I. "Well then," says he, "wise stub, what have you to complain of? Didn't he kick with his right good will? It wasn't a common pitch pine leg he kicked with, was it? No, you were kicked by a great man, and with a beautiful ivory leg, Stub. It's an honor. I consider it an honor. Listen, wise Stub. In old England, the greatest lords think it great glory to be slapped by a queen and made garter knights of. But be your boast, Stub, that ye were kicked by old Ahab and made a wise man of? Remember what I say. Be kicked by him. Account his kicks honors, and on no account kick back, for you can't help yourself, wise Stub. Don't you see that pyramid? With that, he all of a sudden seemed somehow in some queer fashion to swim off into the air. I snored, rolled over, and there I was in my hammock. Now, what do you think of that dream, Flask? I don't know. It seems a sort of foolish to me, though. Maybe, but it's made a wise man of me, Flask. Do you see Ahab standing there, sideways looking over the stern? Well, the best thing you could do, Flask, is to let the old man alone. Never speak to him, whatever he says. Hello, what's that he shouts? Hark! Masthead there. Look sharp, all of ye. There are whales hereabouts. If ye see a white one, split your lungs for him. What do you think of that now, Flask? Ain't there a small drop of something queer about that, eh? A white whale? Did you mark that, man? Look ye. There's something special in the wind. Stand by for it, Flask. Ahab has that's bloody on his mind. But, Mum, here he comes this way. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, same time and place, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading, or check out all the chapters on the YouTube channel Fireside Reading. But until I see you again, please be very well. Good night.